I like to think of mapping as a bit like typography. It's as important to think about the spaces in between the lines and the curves as it is to think about those as well. So we have to think about the lines and the spaces in between. We've seen that in all the presentations we've seen so far, and these people know those issues very well. So today's panelists are some of our heavyweights, our grandees, and also some of our newer blood as well. But we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. We can trace our history and our mapping right back to people like Harry Beck, and even before that, some of the beautiful old maps that have been produced, and we're all wonderfully learning from each other. So we don't need formal introductions to our people here because they have decades and many, many years of experience and influence over wayfinding and design and cartography. And anyway, you've already seen them all speak. So please welcome back to the stage. We have Cerovic, Cerovic, Kaminagai, Andrew Mead, and Sergio Luke. Please welcome them. We nearly had a merger of two of you then. That was quite fun. So today we had some really energetic, wonderful speakers, didn't we, from all parts of the world. I wonder if, first of all, we can pass a few thoughts about some of the presentations we heard today. Maybe we'll start at the end with you, Jörg. Were you inspired by what you heard?
I'm always amazed to see that it's pretty much the same story everywhere. You see that something's missing, that something should be fixed, and you go and you do it. And we have seen examples from all around. It's always the same approach. And then the question is how do you convert that initial energy into a system? How do you get institutions in? How do you get all the stakeholders in and convert it into something durable?
As a transportation geek, I was a geek when I was a teenager. So it's not a bad thing for me, geek. I was explaining that in French about rail, you say ferrovipat or ferrovifile. Ferrovipat is geek, rail, somebody ill because of sick because of rail, but ferrovipat is, it's more funny, yeah. So if you realize yourself by realizing a good map and be happy with that, I've loved the fact that you have seen when you have put the map on a pillar that 5 minutes after or 5 seconds after there was a woman using it. So this feedback is showing how a superpower you have by redesigning something with your science drives people to be more happy, less tired, and so on. So, and this is responsibility, because you can do that yourself by pasting elements in places. I've seen that with what happened in Serbia. But in fact, the best way is to convince the top level to understand and to go down, to govern that correctly. And it's the most difficult thing to do. Most difficult. In 40 years, I couldn't succeed in my region, Paris. I couldn't succeed to obtain some results. So as consultant, I'm now working on other places. I hope we will have some results, and I will come back to Paris and see, they have done that. Why are you not doing that? So jealousy is always a very good source of energy, to do something. So you have to be tactical, but for that you have to, we have to transform the powers we have in responsibility.
Andrew, did you spot some superpowers on view earlier?
Oh, everyone in this room has got superpowers. I'm always in awe of the passion and the attention to detail of map makers. I mean, what Sergio showed, these little ticks and blobs and what they mean. And the nuances of how we lost it on the MTR map, which I wasn't aware of. I thought it was actually still there, and I checked out. And sure enough, they've been taken away. I have no idea why. What I got away from it, not just the passion, the attention to detail to this, but is also it's a complete ecosystem from the architecture. And as an architect here, I always think the best stations are the ones where I don't need signs. And I've got it right then. But then, of course, we always need signs, and signs don't necessarily come in written forms. They're sometimes in artworks that I've commissioned for the various stations, etc., etc. But overall, the thing about this is that there is this kind of universal language about clarity of good design. But then you have to overlay that, I think, with a cultural layer, which is kind of unique. And that's partly to do with how cities work today, but also their history. And I think that's a really interesting nuance thing that comes out when you go to a conference like this. You see a commonality of design quality, but also some variations that are very much specific to the countries and the cultures with those work. And that's really fascinating about being here today.
I think the only thing I'd want to add is that guerrilla wayfinding really is a thing. And I remember a couple of years ago, I think the UITP summit was in Barcelona, and we were on the edges of the wayfinding being organised for that event. Didn't really work out as we were hoping, and I think me and you joked that we should just do it our own way anyway and get a ladder from somewhere and start sticking up things. But actually, no, that actually is a tactic, and it works. Because once the information is out there, you cannot take it away from people when they're using it. So it makes me a little bit embarrassed by the length of time it takes to implement anything in a lot of Western European contexts, when things can be organized for, with much more honest resources, much quicker time, and it works. So
I agree. I think guerrilla signage is definitely on the order of the day. Can I ask Yo to begin with, because you mentioned this, but we'll ask it to everyone on the panel, and maybe some of you would like to throw something in afterwards. You mentioned how bad hubs can be an Achilles heel of a transport organisation. How open was your organisation, the RATP, to some of the initial ideas on doing something about a bad hub?
It's not easy to speak about that briefly. Yesterday, I was a bit not satisfied because I thought myself that my speech was too long. I wanted to summarize that in a few takeaways, And about a bad hub, I can say that it's natural. A hub is not, the multimodality is the way people are, because they go by foot to a station, take a vehicle, it's already multimodal. Sorry for people who like Dubai, but if you want to go to Dubai, a station, metro station, by foot, wow, sometimes. I've taken a hotel just beside a station. In fact, it was these 70 meters were really impossible to do correctly. So we are all multimodal, but multimodality is not native, because I think our lives are organized in in silos. And that's the world organization. Our society is organized like that. So we don't have to fight, but we have to understand the vertical and the horizontal ways of representing the world in which we are working. So if you are in verticality, you have to think about horizontality. If you're horizontal, you have to think about verticality. And what is the problem? The issue in mobility is that in many countries like Australia, many European countries, not all, you have now this contracting system which is arriving with authorities making tenders and attributing a line to an operator or a mode to an operator. If it's not written in the specs that the operator has to be the friend with the neighbor to do together something in a hub, it will not do it because the friend was the enemy of yesterday. How can a Keolis director cooperate correctly with a first group director if 6 months before they were fighting against them? So it's a responsibility again, but of the superior authority. And I think that the hubs are something difficult from the beginning. I am a militant, perhaps, but I want really to convince people who are on some top levels that they have to impulse something. I am lucky because I know some countries with which I'm working that they will obtain something because they have pushed something. And it's not the case in many places. So the hubs are something which exists because of our organizations. And the hubs messes are natural because multimodality is not native for the organizations, but native for the people. So there is a gap between what people need and how the ecosystem is organized. Saying that, I don't bring the solutions, but I have another message for later, that designers can bring many things.
There's no bad hubs in Hong Kong, of course, Andrew, because you've made them all look beautiful.
And according to Samuel, none in Singapore either. I was going to respond to that in a particular way without trying to get too political about it. But it's one of the conversations having a coffee break was about and it goes back to what Yo was just saying, is about leadership. The political governance of the places where I've done transit, which is Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, is quite different to the Western democracies. And they have got the ability to do those super long-term planning and also do that top-down management in terms of how they get their operators to behave and interact with each other. And I think that's one of the keys why from the West you look to Singapore and Hong Kong and say, wow, how you do it. There's quite significant differences actually between Singapore and Hong Kong. A lot of people think it's actually very similar at first. And I realized when I was showing my few little maps yesterday's talk, I kind of glossed over something. I had a map up there that was called pre-merger. There was originally KCR here and MTR. And on the MTR map, they virtually ignored the KCR. It almost doesn't show up as a line. And then the merger happened, which actually was really a takeover. Suddenly, the two lines had the same importance as the rest of the metro. And as Yo says, the public don't read it that way. To them, it's just a way of getting around the city. We still suffer from that today in that we don't have a proper integrated bus and metro map system here in Hong Kong. I know Jean is very heavily involved in that through City Mapper as well. But equally, from a commercial point of view, it's something that we don't do very well. Dubai, I'd go as one of those. I agree with you. I live in Dubai now, and I know what horrible it can be walking to some of the train stations. But I've got to say, again, it's cultural. It grew up as a car city, and it's had a metro relatively recently. And it doesn't have that culture of walking just yet. But once again, what I can say from what's coming in with the future line, the blue line that I'm working on right now, is shading walkability is almost the first thing they're thinking of beyond the metro. So again, you're getting those lessons learned, and they're lessons learned more rapidly with more investment that you would get in many other Western cities. And that's how they move the needle so much quicker than they can in the legacy cities of Europe.
Sergio, you've dealt with some of the Western operators that aren't quite so able to insist on things happening. How do we tackle the problem of bad hubs?
I mean, I think even in a city like London, where the authority has control over most of the network, it doesn't have control over all of the network. So the national rail lines are either on the map, off the map, and responsibility for information and wayfinding often falls somewhere in between. So that's an issue everywhere, and I think that's probably why third-party digital solutions have become so popular, because they only work if they treat the customer as, you know, able to move freely between all these different modes, operators. The operator is absolutely irrelevant if you're using Citymapper or Google Maps or whatever it might be. But this is what slightly sours my overall impression of all these amazing symposiums and meetings and committees and discussions we have, is that we are still talking to each other, and we are nerds. We get excited about map details that perhaps, you know, doesn't excite anybody outside of this room, but that's not going to change opinion among those who really make the decisions and pay for it. So how do we influence the decision makers, those who actually are the governors? You know, what is the story for them?
We're going to need some of that guerrilla tactics, I think. We saw, Jug, your brilliant work with Marty in Barcelona, making that hub look more like what it is. You've done quite a bit of this, haven't you?
Yeah, how did it happen in Barcelona? It happened because Marty was working on this already. I was working with the Metro Barcelona, and we just sat down, the two of us, and we did it without any contract or payment or whatever. And that's how it happened to be. And nobody believed we did so fast to get the RFP. No, there was no RFP. We just did the thing, and it was done. But that's one of the way to show things is on the macro level, on the map, you show the presence of that object that we call the hub. Then on the micro level, we do it through the wayfinding analysis. Even though the governance is not there and there is no funding for it or no maintenance in the future or whatever, we just do the analysis, we point out where are the problems, where are the pain points, we solve it. Then the governance see the problems and they see that it can be solved. And then when you take them on a field trip and you make them do the journey of the passenger, they get it on site. And they have to do it. Now they realize they have to do it. That they themselves feel like idiots in that position. And that all their customers are feeling like idiots. That's one of the best way to convince them, is to take them on the ground. But you have to take them by the hand.
I want to add an example because I have lived it thanks to UITP. I was invited in Sydney last year to manage training session about passenger information and another about hubs. But I realized that it was impossible to do that in a week. The attendees would have been the same. So I've proposed, let's do something called wayfinding for hubs or something like that. Okay, so it was organized. There were not more than 16 people there, but directors from Sydney Metro, Sydney Trains, and so on, big architectural agencies there. So it lasted 3 days. At the beginning, we were making some lectures, from Tokyo, from Paris, from Vienna. And then we have sent the participants to Circular Quay. Circular Quay is very important in Sydney. It's the place where you have all the ferries which arrive from the bay. You have a train station, you have a tram terminal, and you have a bus terminal. And I've heard, why does he send us to Circular Quay? Because it's good, it works. Because we will do the exercise. Okay. So the group, they were divided in 3 groups, and the trainers were formed the 4th group. We went there, we were looking to all, we had asked 5 questions. Where is the ferry for Manly? Where can I eat a pizza? From where can I see the view on the bay? There were 2 other questions I've forgotten. So they were, with this small paper, 1 hour and a half, they came back to the meeting room and they told us, it doesn't work. It's ugly. I was so proud. Not proud of the bad situation of Circular Quay, but that pushing directors to put the glasses of a customer and behaving 1 hour only as a passenger shows them that it's impossible. And the mistakes were so simple. You were going out from the train, you couldn't see which berth was the good one for Manly. You have to enter in one berth, see the screen, go out and go to the other, etc., etc. There were some basic mistakes done. Nobody was knowing that. So, unfortunately, this exercise was not ordered by the local company. So, they were all aware, but I don't know what they have done with that. So, what I want to say is that this is a design method going to the field, looking at what it has to be looked at, and writing the consequences and writing an action plan. So this is very pragmatic. It's not theoretical, but this pragmatism can become a theory, a general theory. And this is one form of the superpowers the design community can bring to the ecosystem. So I've shared that with Arthur from UITP many times, and I think that we have to push all the stakeholders in city after city to try that. But if a decision maker enters in a design method, even without knowing that this is a design method, it will not step back, never. It's compulsory after that, so efficient it is.
And if I can pick that up perhaps with Andrew, exactly your point, it's getting people in or out of the station. We've seen it work so beautifully here in Hong Kong, but then, I'm not putting you on the spot here, but when you come out of the MTR system in the middle of the financial centre, you cannot see an exit sign. You can't escape the shopping centre. Someone else mentioned this previously. So, Andrew, how do we work with those stakeholders where our stations interface with other places? How do we encourage them to help us with the wayfinding and the signage?
It's a huge challenge. A lot of time you're dealing with such varied stakeholders, and particularly when you're trying to get signage and branding, they don't want to mess up their own corporate branding, and it's been done. There are a few successes where we've done. The MTR symbol has become so universal here that it is actually used quite widely, not perfectly, but actually quite widely. That's a great thing about having a metro symbol that is so obvious and recognizable, instantly drawable, and I think there's many examples where they've become much more complicated than that. The second thing is, I think it's just as Yo says, and maybe Jörg's saying, somehow you've got to get the C-suite out of their Mercedes and into the trains. And that's the biggest thing. They're not users of the system. All these decision makers are going around being chauffeured from meeting to meeting to meeting, and they're not users. I always think that's the key thing about being a good designer, is you have to be a user of this stuff. And I was talking to someone earlier about, we're all experts, and the trouble is, I think as experts, we tend to look, I'll say, as signage as experts, and I'll look at architecture of stations as an expert. And it's actually very hard for us to become actually the user, that first-time user. And everyone's a first-time user at some point. Even us as experts in transportation, we love visiting other places. And that's where I think we've got our antenna up most of all, because we're looking at, is that sign in the right place? Is this station entrance planned very easily, et cetera, et cetera. We learn those kind of things. But I think fundamentally, to try and address this thing, you need the city planners to start using the city as the people who use the city, who live in the city use it. And I think there's sometimes a big disconnect between the decision makers and the users, and breaking through that is one of the key successes. And I think going on to that in terms of how it works, particularly say in Singapore is a relatively small place, you do get more of the politicians in Singapore using public transit than you do in other cities. And I think that's one of the keys to Singapore's and the Land Transport Authority's success in achieving such a high seamless quality, not just putting metro at the top of the tree, but also the buses are on an equal level through there, and walking is at an equal level as well, that recognizing it's a whole ecosystem, not just the metro station, but also how much work's been done into the first mile, last mile challenge, because that's what we all face at the end of the day.
So maybe we kidnap all the CEOs, take all their money off them, and plonk them in the middle of a suburb and say, right, find your way from there to there.
Yeah.
Getting more and more guerrilla as we go on.
Sergio, in your presentation, you showed how even sometimes with the best guidelines in the world, their errors can creep in, or people can add things that they shouldn't do. Maybe starting with yourself and working around, what can we do to help steer our colleagues that we work with in maybe other departments, in different engineering and architecture, to make sure they do follow the guidelines that we've worked so hard to achieve?
Remind them that we're all serving the same customer at the end of the day. There's one recent example, and I'm hesitant to talk about it too much publicly because it's not actually publicly visible yet, but I was involved in the design of an information system for a in-car digital display for London. And some of the discussions were early on very interesting, where we'd been brought in once the physical dimensions of the displays had already been settled. There was no going back. And of course, they're smaller than you really need at a low resolution than you actually choose. And that really limits the amount of information you can show legibly, because you've got to also show everything at a large enough text size to meet regulations and all this kind of thing. And the only thing we could do is try to convince that a certain number of these displays be given over to information, not advertising. But of course, that argument was just pushed back as you're not bringing in any money. And I think that's a really limiting way of looking at it, when at the end of the day, if you're not serving the customers who literally are paying for, through their fares, that is limiting the income. So remind that we're all looking after the same customer.
How about yourself, Hugh? What do you feel about people, following the rules that have been set down and making space for all the needs of advertisers and stakeholders and things?
You have to start from the point that the rules will not be followed and the system will not be maintained. That's how you design it, because that's what will happen in most cases. So just as the schematic map, you simplify to the utmost, remove unnecessary kinks, and make things legible for someone who is not acquainted to the city or to the system. Much the same for everything else, be it signage, the wayfinding system, or displays. You just assume it's not going to be respected, it's not going to be updated, it's not going to be maintained. And it has to function. In Belgrade, we didn't see that wayfinding system that we put in place, but we put 180 totems for pedestrians all around the city 7 years ago. Nobody ever maintained them. So half of them are still alive, they're still there, pretty good shape, but they were built so sturdy as to resist the shock of a truck, and no maintenance for 7 years, because you knew nobody would maintain it. So you have to build that into the system. Now, how you do it? By simplifying to the utmost, making it sturdy enough room for everything, and a bit of pedagogy, guidelines. Those guidelines that you serve, it's not a 150 pages documents. It's 10 pages at most, just the basics so that it functions.
You commissioned an entire typeface for the RATP. Did people follow the rules?
Yes and no. At the beginning, it was rather easy because all the panels had to be replaced. So the people involved in creating the panels were not many. But after the first implementation, so a development was necessary, and new people entered in the system. And you imagine, I would say 6 or 7 years after the first implementation, that it's done. So everybody will be skilled to do that. In fact, no, because in all the companies you have this. I don't know if you say that in English, but in French we say mobility. So people change. New people arrive, skilled people go out. So you have to continue the education. And so this was lacking, and you can see that transportation systems like the Paris one is a very long-lasting phenomenon. You can. The renovation of all the 300 stations lasted 30 years. 30. How many presidents were there during these 30 years? So the signage is the same, and the signage is not considered as important as the renovation of a station. So it's really something you have to implement in the company culture. And for that, what I want to say about the interaction between the design specialists and the engineers and the others is that it's really necessary for designers to understand that the others don't see the world with the same eyes. I am engineer. I am educated as engineer. I like to speak with engineers about their problems, because they can understand that, oh, I'm not so unskilled about them. And then I can begin, it's tactical, you know. I want to say something coming from a professor in France whose name is Armand Actuel. I will summarize that very quickly. He says, the designers and the engineers share the same, in French it is, conception analyse. Sorry, it's in French, so. It's in French because I'm speaking English, so. Yeah, no. So I will say in another way. They share something which is common, which is creating something for the progress, to make things progress. But the engineer hides the concept by the calculation, and the designer hides the concept by the shape. If both don't find the concept on which they are working, they can't understand themselves. Because one will see, it is not possible, it's not feasible. And the other will say, it's not possible to see that, it's not usable. They have to go one level up, say, what are we doing together? So it's again a question of responsibility for designers, is to make the effort to understand the others and to try to find the same the same domain, the same concept. And there is no high school of concept. That it doesn't exist, no? So it's important, I think, for designers to do the step and to make the other understand that they have to work together. If not, they still will be, they will always considered as artists doing their thing in their domains, and this is not very. This is not design.
I think one of the important roles we have, particularly in transit, is the concept of legacy. I think you mentioned earlier about design and how we got Frank Pick and a few other people. I particularly feel that myself in my own career. Stepping in here, Roland Paletti was the first chief architect for the MTR. He went on to do the Jubilee line. And again, in London, that's seen as being one of the legacy ones. I was a little bit shocked when I went back to Dubai recently, and in every meeting I go to, they refer to the legacy lines, which is the red and green line, for which I was the chief architect less than 20 years ago. But now that's the legacy line. And the reason that word comes to mind is that just a month or so ago, I attended a conference in London called the Watford Conference, which is a bunch of nerdy people who are passionate about designing train stations, as this audience is as passionate about designing maps. And the theme for that conference was legacy, but it had a subtitle to it. It's not what you create, it's what you leave behind. And I thought that was really very interesting about what you set in motion through here. And I think we've all seen various examples where we've come in as professionals, architects, cartographers, fixing what's been left behind. But then that's going to be left behind, and then it's going to be, quote, fixed by somebody else. How does it modify, et cetera, et cetera? And how do we ensure that continuum of quality keeps going up? Because a lot of things, what we find is the legacy is a very hodgepodge thing. The bad hubs, the bad signage. I just love the gorilla signage in Jakarta. But that's the legacy of a city that's grown up in its chaotic little way that is uniquely Jakarta. And I love that about cities. I love about my job around the places. But I think it's very important for us to remember that all of us are going to be responsible for legacy designs, that the future generation of designers are going to look upon and say, why did they do that? We can do this better. How can we improve it? Because time changes. The systems change. The technology changes. And so we've got to be respectful of that continuum is always going on. We are just custodians for our little bits of our career in an industry that shapes cities, and that's what makes it so amazing to be involved in.
What a wonderful way of looking at it. That's really beautiful. This is going to be the last question I'm going to put to the panel members before you can grill them as well. So get your ideas out there. And I want to start with Jug. We saw today an example of where good ideas from outside the organisation, from yourself working with Marty in Barcelona, have been taken on board by a transit operator. And we're talking with people here. Some of you are outside transit organisations, some of you are right in the heart of them. But how would you advise people, all of you, that people working outside the official transit operator can help to feed in nice, good ideas to improve the system?
My generation has been lucky to grow up with the internet. So whatever you do, whatever you think, you're able to publish it. And that's how we've done most of what we're doing, is we publish everything that we do. It's not, oh, I have a good idea, I talk just to a bunch of friends and then it stays in a drawer. No, you have to convert it at least in a drawing or an action and then publish it as widely as possible. That's about it. Because then maybe you will get to the right person who will hear it and use it. But it's about publishing, using all the media that we have on hand, which we are fortunate still to have. I was on television in Serbia, that didn't help. Internet helped.
Go.
I want to say that Hugh has a Ukrainian tactical. I told you that already. You do some potlatches.
It's a Ukrainian
I've learned it was Ukrainian. Perhaps it's not Ukrainian. Sorry. It comes from a...
Sounds Native American.
Potlatch.
Native American.
Native America? I remember really the person who told me it was Ukrainian. So, potlatch is the way you give something, you give something, you give something, and at the end, the person will give you something back. So, Hughes' tactical is also to have published all his maps, and one day, one person has said, yeah, it's good, why we don't use that? So, it's not possible for everybody. For many designers, if they do that, they will enter in bankruptcy. Because they don't do that by passion, they do that by work, so they want to be paid. And and the difficulty in design, maps or objects or architects' spaces, is that if you don't have correspondent in the company who will be a hub, a human hub, gathering all the wills of all the different services, because the marketing service will have perhaps an objective which is the contrary of the maintenance service, you know. So if not, he will do a project and then a second project, a fourth project, a 10th project, and he will not have any budget more to go on. So he can't finish. So what's important is for people who are in the design side, designers, is to verify that they have a good correspondent in the companies, not the CEO, but a person who will be in charge of their work. So this is not easy everywhere, but after that, tactics is important, because you have to do the first step, and if you obtain the first result, after that, the company, the client can transform itself and become better. I say that because it was exactly my story. I was named in '90, so as responsible of a design management team with people who were not skilled for that. And I was not designer, I was engineer, so I was compatible with the culture of my company. And then I've recruited, obtained the first results, and made, without internet, publicity about the results, explained, and then it has grown. And now there is a design lab in the RATP led by people who are in responsibility, who are between 30 and 40 years old, who do the same job as me, but much better than me. I'm so proud. So, and this was possible because they were installed in the organization as the people who created confidence to the colleagues and confidence to the designers who were architects who were working for RATP. So rely on people in the companies who are who represent the backbone of this creative system is, for me, the most important thing.
Gosh, it's really hard. I've been on the client side of transit for most of my career. This is actually the Dubai Metro Blue Line's first time on the design side. And I think I agree with what Yo says, be on the inside. I always said to people, my role was to be the best client that the architects and the graphic designers, interior designers, industrial designers had ever worked for. And it's incredibly important that an organization allows you to have that position. Yo had a similar position to what I had. The trouble is that things change. Companies change culture, economies change, politics change, global times change. And it's very hard to get that consistency going through there. But I think in terms of young designers going out there, I think the internet gives us such a platform, as you see now from people putting things on Instagram and showing things. You can actually show there. I know Samuel's backstory in terms of his passion for the Singapore Metro map led directly to his first professional job working with LTA and all the wonderful things he's done from there. So there is a living role model in the room to you guys if you want to be inspired by how it can happen. But it takes that passion and it takes that dedication to go through. And there are organizations out there, and that's what makes this industry so wonderful, because generally across the board, not just within the design center, across the board within all these organizations, even at the very highest levels, there are people that truly believe in the passion of transit to transform cities. Sometimes it's hard to get them out of their Mercedes, but when you do, they generally are nice people who will listen and will open a door for you.
I think the difficult thing is, and the word has already come up, that we're all experts in this room. I think that's quite a weight to bear, because if you're being tagged as an expert, you feel like if somebody asks you a question, you're not allowed to say, I don't know. You basically have to come up with something expert level. And maybe it's just a human trait to be self-protectionist, but that can make you a little bit resistant if you're seen as a gatekeeper, that you kind of keep non-experts out, even subconsciously. But one thing that I remember quite clearly from my TfL days when we were building the Legible London database, the best source of content were local experts, the actual people living in the areas that you were mapping. And they too probably had an expert tag, because these would often be people working for the local borough, but they really provided better inputs as to the features that really were there on the ground and would be good for wayfinding than any official source of data. So you'd go along, you'd take your huge printouts of maps of their area, open up the crayons, say, I'm coming back in a week, stick these on the wall, mark everything up. If you went on a Friday afternoon, often you'd come back and it'd just be pub. But if you went on a different day of the week and then come back, honestly, the input would be fantastic. And generally, people give up their time for free to have that kind of influence over, you know, the area, the map of the area where they live and work every day. So, and yeah, just try not to be a gatekeeper and keep people out. Open yourself up.
I hope that's reassuring for young designers here. Please carry on with what you're doing. The organisations, the transit operators could be listening, and you could end up like Sam. So thank you for sharing those. Okay, we're going to open up to the floor now. Are any show of hands of any questions? And Richard will bring a microphone to you. Don't have any questions, we'll ask you to ask one.
We've covered it all, and that's it. No, I just wanted to say, because about the publishing things, it's not only about dissemination. It's once you have published and shown an idea that's represented by drawing or whatever, it starts to become reality. Once people have seen it, they cannot unsee it. And you have created a new reality that eventually will come to the stakeholders in charge, or the people will pressure for it, but you are creating that reality. And today we do have those tools. That's what we are doing.
I also want to add a point answering to Andrew's position about legacy. Because I was involved in many times in the European Days of Heritage. So it happens the third weekend in September since, I would say, 30 years. And I become a guide. And I guide a group of 20 people, not geeks, I would say normal people, grandfather and children, through a trip, 2 hours, and I don't stop speaking with my mic. And everybody's there at the end. And one of the message I say is that heritage is not the admiration of the past. No. Heritage, it is the innovation of yesterday which has succeeded. Heritage and innovation is the same position in the minds. So suddenly people say, okay, so let's continue. But at the same time, let's respect what comes from the past. You know? So we are there one moment on this earth. We are inheritants of what was done before. We'll transmit something to others. So heritage is really a big concept in design, because it is something which has a value and which is being transmitted from generation to generation. So, and this is very important at a time where some politicians, some decision makers can say, so let's innovate, we have to change. It's important to change. Why? Why changing the blue of the metro station panels in black in Paris? That is on now. So we can't fight, only the public can fight now.
Yes, that very change is not going to be something that will be appreciated as heritage, I think. The blue signs work really, really well, Yo. We do have a question, please.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a question for all the gurus up in front. This is actually about financing. It's quite a tricky question in a lot of ways, because just for starters, I came as a transport enthusiast, create my own organization, and just to add, almost all of our works in Jakarta, we started off all pro bono, which basically, yeah, we cover all of our costs to create signages and whatnot. But then it comes to mind like how could we creatively finance all of this while also keeping all our idealism intact? Because I saw some cases, at least in Indonesia, where when you want to start to become a bit more commercial in a lot of ways, and they started off, tearing up all of the idealism that they have, and they lost all of the arts in it. So maybe it's a question for all of you guys there, like, what's the best strategy? Like, what's the thin line, on how could we balance between this financing and being idealist all the time? Thank you.
Adrian.
I'll take it very pragmatically. Transit, it's either the Hong Kong or Japanese model, so the transit operator is a developer and makes money, or it's subsidized. All the others, that's just, it doesn't work, or it's hypocrisy, etc. So you are in that situation. So if you want to keep funding what you are doing in public transport, it means you are subsidizing it. You are paying for it. So you need to get the money for that. And that means using your skills in somewhere else. So you're good at wayfinding in transport, you apply it in shopping malls. You have a design company, you get your money there, and then you fund your passion. You're like you have a company that funds your own NGO. That's what you do. Because if you want to rely on the operator, you're going to wait a lot.
Thoughts on Adrian's question at all?
Oh, the MTR model, I say, I've spoken to many people about how it works. I say it's kind of unique around the land ownership and the land values here in Hong Kong. And I say it's been the envy of the world, and many people have come here, looked at it, and tried to take it back to their hometowns and have not succeeded. But the ownership of MTR is complicated. It's a publicly listed company. If you want to go and buy shares in the MTR, you're most welcome to. But the majority of the shares are owned by the government. And it makes for the governance and leadership of the company quite complicated, because are we a public service or are we a government service? So are we for profit for our shareholders? And that dichotomy between the two sometimes drives us to some odd decisions at various times. But yes, the bottom line is that we are a very successful economic company that drives the development of Hong Kong. We've gone out internationally, we've shrunk back down again because it's very hard to replicate overseas what we do. And that goes back down to service quality, about reliability, that is unique to the Hong Kong ecosystem. So that's what makes it so hard. So yes, we're held up on a pedestal, but recognize that pedestal is very uniquely Hong Kong.
The only thing I'd add to what's already been said is that maybe, okay, money's going to be a problem wherever you are. You're never going to have enough to do everything that you want to do. So there's that. But perhaps, in my experience, where customer information is placed is often alongside things such as marketing, and therefore it can be treated as not essential. That it's a nice to have, it's a cherry on top, and often the budgets for those types of operations are the first ones to be cut where money is tight. And what I would wish for, we've talked a little bit about, is it engineering or other kinds of backgrounds, but maybe if we can show that information is part of the operational need of a transport network, it's not just a nice to have, that would secure the budget, forevermore. That's a difficult thing.
In fact, there are many answers, and a general answer wouldn't be, I think, very useful for you. We should have to study what are the financial issues you are facing to. But if I dare, I could say that information and passenger wayfinding, all this domain has to be considered as an investment domain and not as an operational expense domain. It means that if you don't pay, if you don't finance that, you will not have any result. Oh, in a metro, only the blind people can go out if there is no signage, because they have learned the space. So without good information, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's as if you were saying, the lighting is not necessary in underground. The same. So it's an investment. After having saying that, there is an example in which Hugh and me are involved. It's Luxembourg. I can't say what will happen, but I can say this because it was in an interview in a free newspaper published in Luxembourg. The ministry, she's a woman, has said, we have transformed the whole public system of the country. It's a small country, a bit less than 700,000 people. Okay, small country, but a country with all the levels of governance. And she has said, we have made our public transport system free. You don't pay to take a train, a bus, a tram. You don't pay anything. Only first class in the train. Okay, but if not, it's free. But the growth of the ridership is not high. Why? Because of the quality of many components, like the hubs, like some passenger information. And we want to invest to correct and to make a global chain which is as easy as taking a car and going into the traffic jams and arrive in 1 hour, 5 kilometers far from the home. So with the train, it would be a train and bus. It would take 20 minutes, but people don't do that. Why? Because of all the small stones which are in the shoe of these people. So it's an investment. So again, perhaps you have to influence the people who pay you by giving the examples of other places where it happened. And this type of seminar, and also UITP, is a very good source to get the good information to educate people who are paying you not enough, I understand.
I have the message I'm using lately, because often signage, wayfinding, passenger information falls under the marketing departments in operators or authorities. So my message was, you are doing marketing and branding in one dimension, right? Messages, slogans, images. We are doing passenger experience, which is two-dimensional, three-dimensional even, and that passenger experience is the branding. If your brand and your marketing is fantastic, but the experience is bad, people will hate you, and no nice images will help. So we are basically doing branding and marketing, but in space. And then they open their eyes. Oh, this is our scope. So then you can get the budget.
Now, are there any more questions from the floor at all, please, with the roving Richard?
Okay, hello guys. Just something very straight and straightforward. I know you guys have kind of partially answered this, but just very quickly from each of your own, how do you, because this is something I had from conversations from transit agencies back in Malaysia. I won't name names, but a lot of them say that they can't really see the value in investing in wayfinding or investing in art programs. So just very quickly, how would you be able to convince them otherwise in order to invest in something that is uncountable, of something of value of like wayfinding or even art programs?
I guess the art ones are aimed at me, yeah. So, you know, again, I'll start off with the legacy thing. I got involved in the art programs when I moved to Toronto in the early 1990s. They already had an art program in their metro, so I didn't have to convince anybody there. Somebody had already decided to spend money on art. My job was to convince them to continue to spend money on art. And in fact, I'll jump to Singapore as well. That was the same. Hong Kong didn't originally have an art program, but they were inspired by Singapore's art program, by London, by Paris, that many other metros have it. In Dubai, I didn't manage to get an art program at all. We got some artistic photographs on the wall at Bergerman and Union Station. There's no art program per se. So how do you convince people to do it? Again, within my context, again, I'm not working in a vacuum. Art in cities, art as a value of city, I'm not trying to sell that. It's how do you sell it within the metro program itself. The Singapore Art in Transit program now is the largest public art collection in the nation. And that's been created partly through the legacy that I inherited, but also by my insistence to bring it out. And what we started doing on the Northeast Line was art in every single station, to convince the leadership of the LTA that art was not just for the city centre, not just for the elites, it was for everywhere. And so that was the first part of the argument. The second part was quality art. It was really good quality everywhere. We wanted to showcase Singaporean artists. In Hong Kong, we've primarily showcased Hong Kong artists, but we do have a sprinkle of international artists as well. The third thing was making the art relevant to the people. And sometimes that's done through actually participating local residents in the art, but typically the brief that is written for each and every artwork requires it to be resonant with the audience goes through. And of course, since then, there's been a snowball effect, that people actually believe in the art, they enjoy the art, and then there's now an expectation, certainly in Singapore, that there will be art in every single station going forward. So it's kind of got this multiplier. Back to the actual finances, again, the point was typically 1% for art. That was a North American thing through here. If you apply 1% of the value of building a metro station, you'll have an awful lot of art in your stations. I did the calculations. The cost of our art program, certainly for the Northeast Line, was 0.2% of the total cost. And we got a lot of art for that. So again, from value for money. And I'll go back to the final thing about something you said about, let's think about the cost of a signage system in the building of a metro. Again, it's probably going to be about 0.2%. But you try operating your railway without wayfinding signs. It just won't work. Yeah? And similarly with the art program has become so synonymous with the Singapore Metro that when they open up the metro, the first thing the cameras go in, where's the artwork? What's the artwork? What's it tell us about? It's not saying, where's the lights? Where's the signaling system? Where's the platform screen doors? They all cost a hell of a lot more than the art program, but those are the cherries on the cake that the public really resonate with, because we are building very important community buildings. These are the hearts of these new communities. I think Samuel pointed out the policy of Singapore now to move people out of the city centre. And I'm really proud of how Singapore's embraced the idea that they're getting their top architects, their top urban planners to plan these places to be places that people don't want to leave. It's kind of ironic that they're transit-orientated places, but they're so nice, why would you want to leave them? And that to me is a true sign of that legacy that we started 20, 30 years ago, raising the quality design, having that conversation about design quality matters to the leadership of LTA, to the leadership of the Singapore government, that they now believe in it and it's part of their DNA. And I think that's the legacy that I've left behind in Singapore and hopefully here in Hong Kong as well.
I can add a small anecdote involving Andrew. I think you have forgotten that. But
I feel more than I remembered.
it was in 2012. There was a design and culture seminar organized by UITP here in Hong Kong. It was called Art in Transit, co-organized with MTR, I remember. And we were walking in a station, and you had a dispute with Sandra Bloodworth. You remember?
I have many disputes with her.
Sandra Bloodworth is the huge art and design director of New York Transit Authority. So she has launched an art program when the renovation of the station began in '87, I think, and we were in 2012, and she told us there were more or less 370 artworks in the New York Metro. So you can imagine New York Metro has not this image of an art place, but it's fully artistic now. So, and she has said, why wasn't she in fact, you were agreeing together, but it was a play. You were speaking about passenger, about marketing and so on, and she said, I don't agree. Art is only empowerment.
Art for the artists.
Art for the artist and also for MTA, for the organization. So the motivations to implement art in the transit networks are first serve the customer, making the journey better, not so boring, and bring good surprises, and also to make the organization more respectable in the urban community. So the HKMTR in Hong Kong, or LTA in Singapore, or RATP in Paris can play as cultural players in their ecosystem. So there are several motivations to do that.
If we have no more questions from the floor, can I see one? Oh, yes, Sasha's got one.
Okay, testing. I just wanted to provide an idea to the question about raising funding. We have an old family friend who actually made a living for a few years just on, he would make a hand-drawn map of a tourist town, and he'd go around to the different businesses and ask and say, hey, I'm making a map, informational map for tourists, would you like your business to be included in the map? And they said, yes, of course. And he said, okay, well, it's, $500 or whatever, $1,000. So I don't know if this works, in obviously Southeast Asia is a different context, but, maybe there is a way to somehow do it with this guerrilla approach if the institutions truly are just not reachable. And I don't know, maybe you guys can comment on that as well. So.
Any more for any more? Thank you, Sasha. There's one gentleman at the back there, please. Cerovic.
Thank you. I was actually talking to a gentleman back in India of a particular metro authority, right? And I was kind of asking him, why aren't there any artworks in a particular hub, right? The view I got was that hubs, particularly large metro stations, are places where artworks would attract people. The idea was to disperse people as early as possible, and therefore there was no artists installed, right? So, what's your take on that? Open question. Yeah, different school of thought, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm faced with this question a lot. The first thing I'll say to people is that the Metro's not an art gallery, and this is something that Sandra and I used to clash over quite strongly, because first and foremost, it's a transit station, so it's a transit network, a metro network. But then why have art? That's a very broad question. And I say art is everywhere. Why shouldn't it be in a metro station? But then when you put it in a metro station, I want my artworks, and I'm very specific about this, to work really, really hard. They're not just pretty things to look at. They've got to resonate with the place. And I think for those that came on the tour, the Admiralty QR code, Sandra would never allow that into her system because it's not, quote, a work of art by an artist. It's actually by an architect, not even an artist at all. But the reason it works there is because it's relevant to its place. And it also works as a simple mind map. You know it's there. You go, I went past this thing. And therefore, I'm in a deep underground space, and I've seen the picture of the giraffe. It's things that car parks use all the time, but done in a much more sophisticated and clever way. And there's another kind of higher cultural reason that I'll give out to you as well, is that metros are the showcase for a city and its people, right? As tourists coming in here, and I know we're professionals in the industry, but if you think about the millions of tourists that come into London, Paris, whatever, they'll almost all take the metro. It's part of the culture of the city. London Underground is famous. You've got to go on London. And the art program is a mechanism to show to the world who you are, who the best artists are, what is your culture, what are values to you. And the diversity of an art program, which is one of the other key components of what I do with a build-in, is absolutely key to that, to show the whole range of your city off to the world visitors. And that's why I'm very determined in when I commission art programs that I don't only commission fine artists. I've had fashion designers, I've had cartographers, I've had a computer scientist do an artwork, a really broad range of people, all being able to respond to a brief that says, tell me what you think is unique about this place, and speak to the people who will be using this station, not just now, not just next year, but for tens of years forward, because that's what also is different to us, to an art gallery. We're not turning over artworks on a seasonal basis. These are permanent artworks designed to be sitting specifically in the place that they are to last for decades. And that really what sets art in public transit separate away from art in other public spaces, and certainly art in museums. But I would never say that any of the projects I've ever done, we've created an underground art gallery. No, we're first and foremost a transit system.
I have two short answers. First, I've answered to an interview last week, which is published in a French media. It's in French. At the end, the journalist was asking to me, so what do you think about the artworks which arrived with the new Grand Paris, so the larger Grand Paris Express, the new lines, artworks? And I've said, I will not answer because I want to see the artworks with the passengers. I don't want to answer before I see the interaction between the artworks and the space, the situations. Because you can judge something on a PowerPoint, on a scheme, even in a station which is being built, but I've seen so many situations where it was not working or it was working a way differently, that the situation, the real situation, is very important. You know, one of my boss had told me one day, I was not yet design manager, he told me, yes, you have to go there. Design is, so in French we say also conception, is conception for real world. He told me that. I've thought it was a good approach. I've forgotten the second answer, so it will be shorter.
Now, I'm looking at Jörg now about timings. Do we have time for a final question, or do we need to wrap up?
I think we have to wrap up. Yeah, we have to wrap up.
From the last person who spoke, Yo there, someone who started designing transit maps in the 1980s, to some of you people today just starting on your journey, we have had a fantastic, wide, diverse range of experiences. And as Andrew said yesterday, the work that you're doing or you have done is going to be seen by millions of people. So all I can say is keep on making mapping. Thank you all very much.